Imagine a jungle so silent that even the air refused to move. And inside that silence, one Marine dragged a two-man weapon alone because his partner had just been killed. Ahead of him waited 16 Japanese bunkers, each one packed with machine guns, grenades, and soldiers sworn to fight to the last breath. But instead of retreating, instead of waiting for reinforcements, this one Marine charged forward, and in just 30 minutes, the entire Japanese line collapsed around him. This is the unbelievable true story of a man who fought a battle designed for a team of two, all by himself, and changed the fate of an entire Pacific island. A full story, approx. Seek 500+ words. Narrative written in cinematic documentary style. YouTube-friendly pacing, dramatic pauses, and visual suggestions included. If you want it in parts, I can also split it. The Island of No Return. The morning heat on WWII Island did not rise slowly. It struck like a hammer. The island was only 2 miles long, but one of the most heavily fortified places on Earth. During WWII, the Japanese had spent nearly 2 years turning it into a floating fortress. Bunkers of coral, machine gun nests dug into sand hardened like stone, mortars hidden under palm roots, and a beachfront layered with traps, wire, and interlocking fields of fire. When the Marines looked at aerial photos, they said, "This is going to be hell." They were wrong. It would be worse. And among the thousands of Marines preparing for the assault was one quiet man, Corporal Harold "Red" Atkins. He wasn't the biggest soldier. He wasn't the loudest. But every man in his unit knew one thing. When Red says he's got your back, you can trust him with your life. Red's job? Operate a two-man 37mm anti-tank gun. One man aimed, one man loaded. Together, a deadly team. But Red didn't know that in 24 hours. He would be using that weapon alone. The landing that went wrong. The Marines hit the beach at dawn. Nothing went as planned. The tides were too low. Landing craft got stuck. Men had to wade hundreds of meters under machine gun fire. Bullets slapped the water like rain. Mortars exploded like thunder, and Japanese bunkers poured fire into the helpless Marines. Red's squad landed behind schedule, struggling to pull the 400-pound 37mm gun through waist-deep water. The gun wasn't designed to be dragged by hand, certainly not under fire, but the Marines had no choice. Then, a mortar shell exploded near them. The world flashed white. Sand and water blasted into the air. When Red opened his eyes, his loading partner, Private Lewis, was lying face down in the surf. Red shook him. No movement. Lewis was gone. The two-man weapon was now a one-man burden. Bullets hit the water around him. Machine guns raked the beach. Red looked at the gun, then at the bunkers ahead. He whispered, "All right, then I'll do it myself." The first bunker falls. Red found cover behind a burned-out Amtrak. He set up the 37mm gun alone, something almost no Marine could do. Normally, one man aimed, one man loaded, one man supplied ammunition. Red did all three. He slammed in the first shell, aimed through the tiny scope, and fired. The shot hit the bunker with a crack like a giant snapping tree. Inside, Japanese soldiers shouted in shock. Before they could recover, Red fired again, and again. The bunker went silent. Marines nearby stared at Red like they were watching a man possessed. One said, "Holy hell, he's using that thing like it's a rifle." But Red didn't hear him. He was already dragging the gun toward the next bunker. 30 minutes of hell. The Japanese understood what was happening. If this Marine kept moving bunker to bunker, their entire defensive line would collapse. So they targeted him. Machine gun bursts ripped around him. Snipers pinned him behind piles of coral. Grenades rolled toward his position. But Red never stopped. He crawled, dragged the gun, loaded shells with bleeding hands, fired until the barrel glowed. Every time a bunker fell, Marines behind him surged forward. He wasn't a soldier anymore. He was a one-man battering ram. A Japanese officer reportedly shouted, "Destroy that single gun! It is killing the entire line." But they couldn't. Red moved too fast, too precise, too determined. And soon, the Marines realized something unbelievable. He had taken out 6 bunkers, then 9, then 12, all by himself. The final 4. The last 4 bunkers were the toughest. They were positioned to cover each other. Take one and the others would fire at you. A death trap. But Red wasn't stopping. He dragged the gun through a trench, sweat and blood dripping into the sand. A Marine lieutenant tried to order him back. "Corporal, you can't take that alone!" Red wiped his face and said only, "Watch me." He fired the first bunker. Hit! Shifted the barrel. Second bunker, destroyed. Now only 2 remained. But they had spotted him. Machine gun fire shredded the sand around him. Red lay flat, heart pounding. He had 2 shells left in the box. He loaded one. Fired! The bunker erupted. One left. He slid the final shell in, took aim through the scope. A Japanese soldier inside the bunker spotted the glint of the lens and opened fire. Bullets cracked inches from Red's head. He didn't move. He exhaled. Fired! Silence. Then Marine voices behind him roared, "The line is broken! Move!" 30 minutes that won a battle. From the first shot to the fall of the final bunker, only 30 minutes had passed. 30 minutes that saved hundreds of Marines. 30 minutes that shattered a Japanese fortress. 30 minutes where one man used a weapon built for 2, alone. When officers inspected the battlefield, they counted 16 destroyed bunkers, all knocked out by the same 37mm gun, all by the same Marine. Red Atkins collapsed from exhaustion after the battle, his uniform shredded, hands burned, face blackened with smoke. But he had done the impossible, and the Marines who watched him that day would never forget it. One wrote later, "I saw a man fight a war by himself, and he won, the Marine who fought like a battalion. The cost of heroism." When the battlefield finally quieted, medics moved in. The air smelled of smoke, coral dust, and burned palm fiber. But in the center of the wreckage lay the shattered remains of the 37mm gun, the weapon that had just changed history. Beside it, Red Atkins sat on the ground, too exhausted to stand. His hands were shaking violently, not from fear, but from the sheer physical punishment his body had taken. Dragging a 400-pound gun through sand, loading shells alone, firing nonstop for half an hour, all while being hunted by snipers and machine gunners. A corpsman reached him and said, "Marine, you need help." Red looked up, eyes red from sweat and smoke. "Help the wounded." "I'll be fine." It wasn't bravado. It was how Red was built. But when he tried to stand, his legs buckled. The corpsman barely caught him. Word spreads through the beachhead. As more Marines pushed inland, the story of what had happened spread like wildfire. Platoons whispered, "Did you hear? One guy took out the whole line." Officers asked, "Where's the Marine with the AT gun? Get him here!" Even hardened combat veterans, men who had fought in Guadalcanal and Tulagi, went silent when they saw the wrecked bunkers. 16 defensive positions, all destroyed by one Marine. One sergeant walked the line and shook his head. "This isn't battlefield work. This is legend." A general comes looking. Later that day, Major General Julian Smith, commander of the entire division, arrived at the front. He was known as a stern, serious man, but when he heard the reports, he demanded, "Take me to him." Red was sitting against a palm stump, sipping water, uniform torn, helmet dented by shrapnel. The general approached. Marines straightened, but Red didn't even notice. He was trying to bandage his hand. A captain cleared his throat. "Corporal Atkins, the general would like to speak with you." Red looked up, confused. Smith asked, "Son, did you really take out those bunkers by yourself?" Red shrugged slightly. "I just did what needed doing, sir." The general wasn't a man easily impressed, but he nodded slowly. "You saved a lot of Marines today." Red looked away and whispered, "Wish I could have saved Lewis." The general placed a hand on his shoulder. No more words were needed. The night after the battle, night fell over Betio like a curtain. No wind, no insects, only the distant crackle of small fires. Marines dug foxholes. Others slept on the bare ground, too tired to move. But Red didn't sleep. He sat beside the ruined 37mm gun, tracing its metal scars with his fingers. It wasn't just a weapon to him. It was a partner, a friend, the only thing that had stood between him and death. A young private approached nervously. "Corporal, how'd you do it? Weren't you scared?" Red stared at the horizon. "Everyone's scared, kid." "The trick is to move anyway." The private swallowed. "And why didn't you fall back?" "We thought you'd been hit." Red took a deep breath. "Because if I stopped, everyone behind me would die." The private didn't know how to respond. He simply nodded and walked away, forever changed. The day after bunker inspection. The next morning, engineers surveyed the destruction. Each bunker told a story. Perfect 37mm shell holes, burn marks from exploding ammo. Walls cracked open like eggshells. Japanese soldiers stunned by the power of the gun. One officer said quietly, "This wasn't luck. This was discipline." Another whispered, "This man fights like a full squad." The Japanese had built those bunkers to survive naval guns, artillery, even tank fire. But one Marine with a two-man weapon had torn them apart. The engineers counted carefully. One bunker destroyed, another, all the way to 16. And in every single one, shell casings traced back to Red's gun. It became undeniable. A one-man assault, a one-man breakthrough, a one-man catastrophe for the Japanese. The Japanese perspective. On the other side of the battlefield, captured Japanese diaries told an astonishing story. One entry read, "There is a Marine with a cannon who moves like a ghost. No matter where we fire, he finds our door and destroys us." Another wrote, "This single gun is defeating our entire defense. How can one man serve it alone?" To the Japanese defenders, Red Atkins wasn't a Marine. He was a nightmare. Some believed multiple guns were firing. Others thought an entire anti-tank platoon had flanked them. Not a single soldier imagined it was just one exhausted, bleeding corporal dragging a weapon through sand. Marines advanced because of him. With the bunkers gone, the Marines surged inland. Positions that could have taken days fell in hours. Captain Reynolds, Red's commanding officer, later wrote, "Without Atkins' actions, the assault would have stalled. He opened the door for the entire battalion." Red didn't see it that way. When someone told him he'd saved hundreds of lives, he just said, "We all had a job." The aftermath. A hero who didn't want the spotlight. After the island was secured, officers pushed for Red to be recommended for the Medal of Honor. But Red refused to talk about what he did. When a war correspondent tried interviewing him, Red said, "Talk to the guys who didn't make it. They're the real heroes. Modest, quiet, unshakable." That was Harold Atkins. The Marines eventually awarded him a high decoration, but Red rarely spoke of it. To him, medals didn't matter. Saving lives did. The legacy of a one-man assault. Years later, military historians studied the battle. What Red Atkins did remains one of the most extraordinary individual actions in Marine Corps history. Using a two-man weapon alone, under direct fire. He destroying 16 bunkers. In under half an hour, turning the tide of the battle. Tacticians still analyze his movement, accuracy, and efficiency. Psychologists study his mental resilience. Marines tell his story to new recruits. One modern Marine instructor said, "We teach teamwork, but sometimes the war gives you a man who is the team." A letter that said everything. 2 days after the battle, mail finally made it to the island. Red received a letter from home, creased, water-stained, but intact. It was from his mother. Her handwriting trembled across the page. "I pray every night that God keeps you safe. If you have to be brave, but please come home." Red folded the letter slowly. He'd just fought the hardest 30 minutes of his life. But these 30 seconds hit him even harder. A young Marine passing by asked, "Everything all right, Corporal?" Red smiled faintly. "Just a reminder of why we fight, kid. The war doesn't slow down." The battle for the island wasn't over. Even after the bunkers fell, Japanese forces fought fiercely from caves, trenches, and hidden pillboxes. Command handed out assignments. Some Marines guarded supply lines. Some carried ammo. Others patrolled the ruins. Red? He went back to doing what he always did. He volunteered for the most dangerous jobs. A lieutenant told him, "Corporal, you've done enough for 10 men. Stand down." Red shook his head. "Men are still fighting. I'm not done yet." There were no speeches, no medals. Just a Marine who believed the fight ended only when his brothers were safe. The night patrol that turned into a trap. On the third night after the assault, Red joined a 5-man patrol moving along the northern ridge of the island. It was silent. Too silent. The ocean waves slapped the distant reef, but the jungle was dead. No birds, no insects, only the faint rustle of palm fronds. One Marine whispered, "Something's wrong." They were right. A flare exploded overhead. Instant daylight. Japanese soldiers, survivors from the collapsed bunkers, jumped up from concealed holes and opened fire. The Marines hit the ground. Bullets sliced leaves above their heads. Red grabbed a fallen Marine's bar rifle and returned fire in short, precise bursts. Another Marine shouted, "Fall back. We're outnumbered!" Red yelled back, "Not until we get everyone out." He crawled forward, grabbed a wounded private. and dragged him behind a burned log. Grenades exploded around them. Dirt rained down like ash. But Red never let go. One by one, he hauled the wounded to safety, even as the Japanese charged with bayonets. Finally, the patrol regrouped and pushed back the enemy long enough to escape the ambush. 2 Marines lived that night because of Red. Word of his bravery spreads again. By sunrise, the patrol's survival story spread across the battlefield. One Marine said, "He doesn't fight like a man. He fights like he's carrying the whole unit on his back." Another added, "If you're in trouble, pray Atkins is nearby." Even officers, usually reserved, spoke openly. Atkins acts with the instincts of a seasoned sergeant. But Red didn't want praise. When someone tried thanking him, he simply said, "Take care of the young guys. That's all the thanks I need." The general's second visit. General Smith sought him out again. He found Red cleaning his rifle near a destroyed bunker. The general said, "Corporal, your actions continue to inspire this entire division." Red nodded respectfully. Smith continued, "You've shown courage equal to any Medal of Honor recipient I've ever seen." Red looked uncomfortable. "Sir, with all due respect, give medals to the men who didn't come home." General Smith studied him for a long moment, then said quietly, "This war needs men like you, Atkins. Not for medals, but for morale." A visitor from another unit. Later that week, a Marine from another regiment approached him, nervous, trying to find the right words. "Are you Corporal Atkins, the one with the 37mm gun?" Red sighed. "Yeah, that was me." The Marine swallowed. "My brother. He was in the squad that broke through the line because of you. He wrote home, said a miracle saved them." Red looked down and said softly, "No miracles, just Marines." But the young man shook his head. "No, sir. Sometimes God chooses a Marine to do a miracle." Red didn't reply. He didn't know how. A found Japanese map changes everything. Engineers searching the island discovered a Japanese field map marked with defensive plans. One section stood out, a red ink circle around the very bunkers Red destroyed, and a note in Japanese, "Primary defense point, must not fall." It meant those 16 bunkers were the heart of the entire Japanese strategy. If Red hadn't broken them, the Marines would have been trapped on the beach, easy targets for artillery and counterattacks. When officers told Red this, he simply said, "Then I'm glad I took the right ones." Preparing for the next island. There was no rest. The Pacific Campaign didn't allow it. Within days, Marines packed equipment for the next assault. Another island, another fortress, another deadly landing. But this time, everyone wanted Red in their unit. One sergeant joked, "If Atkins comes with us, the Japanese might surrender early." Another Marine said, "Put him on the beach first. He'll win the war before we land." Red laughed for the first time since the battle. "Cut it out, boys. I'm just doing my bit." But deep down, the men believed it. Where Red went, victory followed. A quiet night before the next storm. On the final night before they left Betio, Red sat alone on the shoreline. The tide rolled gently in. The sky shimmered with stars. For the first time in days, he allowed himself to breathe. He pulled out his mother's letter again. Read it slowly, folded it carefully, then whispered into the calm night, "I'll come home. I promise." A promise he intended to keep, even if the war tried to stop him at every step. And that is the story of the Marine who carried a battlefield on his shoulders. A man who fought a mission made for 2, completely alone, 16 bunkers, 30 minutes, and a legacy that refused to die. If you want more untold World War II stories, stories that textbooks skipped but soldiers remembered, then make sure you subscribe because the next one is even more unbelievable. This is history the way it should be told. Raw, real, and unforgettable.